Get lost, you idiot. Tony Walker erupted into a fury and threw a chair at me, his face flushed red. He pointed at me and started laughing as he saw me tremble with astonishment and dread. Tony is parading around looking very powerful. He is the head of the sales promotion department for a large fast food chain subsidiary. Executives and senior staff from the entire group are present at the company's year-end celebration in addition to the main office workforce. To the best of my knowledge, Tony's assertions that he has ties to the CEO are a bunch of bullshit. Everyone at the party is shocked by his outburst. However, he continues to insult me in spite of the cold environment. My wife M came out against Tony at that very moment because she could no longer watch in silence. Though unfazed by Emily's audacious demeanor, Tony was stunned when a second figure emerged. He paled his face, which had been flushed with pride. Finally, Tony, who had been acting egotistical and riding high, faced his match. He paid a heavy price for what he did. However, Tony appeared to be involved in something far more significant. Magnus Walker is my name. I tend to agree with those who tell me it's a strange name. Since I was a young child, I've felt as though it overshadows me. My life has been fairly normal, even with such a fancy name. My life is excellent, yet I'm busy every day because I'm 38 and in the prime of my career. Things are going well because I have a wonderful wife and we recently had a son. Maximus, which translates to the greatest, is the name we gave our son in honor of my own name. I can still picture my wife, Emily's shocked expression when I told her the name I had thought of. I wanted him to grow up big and strong, which is why I chose the name. However, I worry if, like me, he will eventually feel that his name is too much for him. Perhaps my parents are the source of my talent for naming things. I am employed at a large fast food company. My decision to pursue this career was heavily influenced by my parents. They always state that they are thrilled when they see people smile after a delicious dinner, and they love to cook. Like them, nothing makes me happier than watching folks go with smiles on their faces and full bellies. We're going to open a new location in a big mall, and the business is doing great. This time, however, the business is run by a group subsidiary rather than being directly owned. I went to check it out since I had the day off, and I was taken aback by how crowded it was. I was reassured that there was nothing to be concerned about by the first day's crowds. Abruptly, though, I heard a voice shouting from the rear of the shop. "How is it that you can't understand anything so basic? Are you attempting to destroy this place?" The shouts startled more people than just me. Every customer inside turned to face the voice as well. At that moment, a young woman who appeared to be an employee fled in tears. I peered into the staff area out of concern that anything might be amiss, but a large man gave me a harsh glance. "What's your problem? This isn't a freak show. Get out." The guy, who had taken off his jacket but was still in a suit, was clearly an employee, but he wasn't acting like someone who should be dealing with customers. Annoyed by his intimidating attitude, I tried to stand my ground. "Aren't you an employee? Don't you think that attitude is a little off?" The guy sneered at me, lightly snorted through his nose, then laughed and went off. The rest of the day went by without any major issues, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. So I went back to the office to look into who that guy was. According to the employee records, his name is Tony Walker, and he's the head of the sales promotion department. His department doesn't usually have much to do with the actual stores, but it seems he was brought in for this event to help with the promotional activities for the new store. But there's no way that kind of customer service attitude is acceptable for someone working in this group. I decided to visit the store again on the final day of the opening campaign, and it was still bustling with customers. The store operations seemed to be going smoothly, but that wasn't what I was there to check. Sure enough, there was Tony at the register, looking annoyed, and doing nothing to help anyone. He just stood there looking bored, while the rest of the staff were clearly struggling to keep up with the crowd. I couldn't stand it any longer and spoke up. Hey, a customer's here. Someone help them. Is this place full of useless people or what? Even though the store was in chaos, Tony still didn't make a move to help. Aren't the other employees busy? Shouldn't you be helping them? I asked in disbelief. Tony clicked his tongue and then said something unbelievable. Can't you see we're busy? If you're just here to mess around, get lost. Not only did Tony treat me like a nuisance, but he also looked around to make sure no one was watching before forcefully shoving me out of the store. And as I stumbled and fell, Tony deliberately extended a hand to help me up. Oh, are you okay, sir? With a half smile on his face, Tony rushed over, making it look like I had just tripped on my own. I could hear the snickers around me. Unable to bear the cold stares from those around me, my face turned bright red with embarrassment, and I quickly ran away from the scene. A month after that humiliating incident, due to certain circumstances, I was transferred to a subsidiary within the group. And wouldn't you know it, I was placed in the same sales promotion department where Tony works. My job was to investigate why sales were declining, but I was pretty sure Tony was the reason. On my first day, I was shocked beyond words. So you're the guy they sent over, huh? You've got a real broke look about you. You better be useful to me. Tony assumed I was just some temp worker and looked down on me without even bothering to ask my name. Looking around, I noticed that all the employees in the department had pale faces, and the overall work efficiency seemed really low. The biggest problem was during the planning meetings. Everyone seemed to be tiptoeing around Tony and didn't dare speak up. The whole atmosphere was so strange that I couldn't help but feel uneasy. So I started asking the employees what was going on, but no one would say anything. They just looked scared. A new employee transferred in after me, but they always seemed anxious and showed no enthusiasm for the job. I couldn't just leave things as they were in this lifeless workplace. Having reached my limit, I decided to confront Tony directly, though I tried to be tactful about it. Tony, I think it'd be better if you took the employees' opinions into account more. Who are you again? Whatever. More importantly, are you stupid for thinking somebody like you could tell me what to do? Tony didn't even bother to remember my name and was convinced that his opinion was the only one that mattered. There was no point in trying to reason with him. If anything, he retaliated by piling a mountain of pointless work on my desk. Some of the documents had nothing to do with my job, but all he said was, "Just do it." I ended up working overtime every day, losing the energy to even talk back, and eventually became mentally and physically exhausted. As the year-end approached, there were only a few days left until the big annual year-end party. This event was a grand affair every year, not just with employees from the main office, but also executives and senior staff from all the group companies. Although I was currently working at a subsidiary, I was technically still part of the main office, so I had to attend. Tony, being in a managerial position, would probably attend as well. I knew it would be troublesome if I ran into him at the party, but I couldn't skip it due to my position. I figured if I got the chance, I'd expose Tony's bad behavior in front of the main office execs. But I knew that when faced with Tony himself, I'd probably lose my nerve and not be able to say anything. On the day of the big year-end party, I was feeling nervous and tried to stay out of sight, hanging out on the sidelines. When I ran out of my drink and headed to the bar, I accidentally bumped into Tony. "Hey, aren't you just a lowly temp? What are you doing here?" Tony was already visibly drunk, his face flushed red. I was told to attend the party. So, this isn't the kind of place where a loser like you can just show up. No matter how I tried to explain why I was there, the drunk Tony wouldn't listen and just kept treating me like dirt. As I sighed in frustration, Tony suddenly grabbed me by the collar, bringing his booze-smelling face uncomfortably close. "You don't know this, but I'm connected to the CEO. We're not even in the same league." Maybe it was the alcohol talking, but I couldn't make sense of what Tony was saying. "Whatever, just get your hands off me." When I brushed his hand away, Tony's face turned an even deeper shade of red. Like a demon, he furrowed his brow. "I'm important, you know." Tony, drunk as a skunk, couldn't even form a proper sentence. Just as I thought this was my chance to slip away, Tony grabbed a nearby chair and hurled it at me with all his might. The chair slammed into a table set up for conversation, sending food and drinks flying everywhere with a loud crash. If it had been just a few inches closer, I might have ended up in the hospital with serious injuries. The unexpected situation left me pale with fear, my body trembling. But Tony just smirked down at me, pointing and laughing loudly like something was hilarious. "Get lost, you idiot. Just having a loser like you around ruins the mood." Looking around, I saw that not only the nearby employees, but everyone in the room who had witnessed the commotion was pale and speechless. In the midst of this serious atmosphere, Tony's laughter echoed throughout the venue. Then my wife Emily, who had been standing a bit further away, came over. Angrier than I'd ever seen her, she confronted Tony. "Hey, who do you think you are? Clearly, you don't know who he is." Emily stood confidently, hands on her hips, glaring down at Tony. But Tony, not understanding the situation, leered at her from head to toe with a creepy grin. Emily, who's a famous model on TV and in magazines, is stunningly beautiful, with a slender figure that anyone would envy. Drunk and lecherous, Tony started moving toward her. "Hey, aren't you that famous model, Emily? Did you come as a guest for the party? Could you stop breathing your disgusting breath on me and stay away?" Emily's disgust was clear, but Tony, as usual, didn't listen and kept trying to touch her inappropriately. Then Emily's slap landed squarely on Tony's face with a satisfying smack, sending him crashing to the ground. "What the hell was that for? Do you even know who I am? I'm Tony Walker, with the same last name as the CEO. What are you even talking about? With the CEO backing me up, I can deal with a woman like you any way I want." Emily and I both looked at Tony, confused by his nonsensical rant. "Tony, what are you even saying? I don't know what you're trying to get at, but if you keep treating my husband like this, you'd better be ready to face the consequences." Tony's eyes widened in shock at Emily's words. "Husband. You're married to this loser." Tony couldn't believe it, his face twisted in confusion. Just then, a man in a luxury suit stepped between us with a puzzled expression. "What are you guys doing here?" "Paul, the CEO. There's someone here who shouldn't be. Get rid of this loser right now." Tony, who had been sitting on the floor, started babbling incoherently, his face drenched in sweat. But the CEO just frowned and then took my hand. "What are you doing here, Magnus? The new CEO. It's almost time for your inaugural speech. You need to be more composed." "Sorry, Dad. I was just dealing with a little issue." The man in the expensive suit standing before me was Paul Walker. He's my father and the current CEO of this major fast food chain. He's set to step down soon and take on the role of chairman, with me slated to become the new CEO. This year's big year-end party was also meant to be the event where my promotion to CEO would be officially announced. Being the CEO of a major fast food chain is a heavy burden for me, so whenever I have to speak in public, I plan to leave it to the vice president, whom my father trusts the most. But my father insisted that I attend this year's party to fulfill my responsibilities as the new CEO, although I never expected it would turn into such a fiasco. As my father smiled and gripped my hand firmly, my wife Emily, who had been wearing a strange smile, stood up and brushed the dirt off my clothes. In this suddenly peaceful moment, I glanced over at Tony. He was shaking uncontrollably, his once red face now pale as a ghost. "What? You're the CEO? How? Why?" Tony, clearly rattled, stammered as he broke into a cold sweat, slowly scooting back on his rear like a villain from a comic book. As Tony tried to make his escape, Emily, her smile tight with irritation, spoke up. By the way, you mentioned something earlier about being related to or knowing the CEO. But there's no way someone like you is part of the Walker family. What are you talking about? Hearing the full story from Emily, my father's expression darkened as he glared at Tony like a demon. What do you think you're doing? Claiming to be a part of the Walker group when you have no connection to our family. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Terrified by the menacing glares from both my father and Emily, Tony's bravado crumbled, and he quickly dropped to his knees, pressing his forehead to the floor as he repeatedly apologized. I had transferred to Tony's department as part of my preparation to take over as CEO, and the results were more than I had expected. One of my hobbies is watching foreign TV shows and documentaries, and my favorite is a famous program where the CEO disguises themselves as a janitor or part-time worker to uncover hidden issues within the company. Officially, I was supposed to be handling international business. But behind the scenes, I was visiting various subsidiaries within the group to investigate their internal issues, finding numerous problems and areas for improvement. In short, I wanted to improve the company by playing a little game of undercover boss, inspired by my favorite show. What I discovered while working there was that struggling subsidiaries within the group always have room for improvement. This time, I had taken the opportunity to work under Tony, but the situation was far worse than I had imagined, and I got caught up in it myself. Tony's department was in a state far worse than any other. When I revealed that my transfer was actually part of a surprise investigation, Tony's face went from pale to ghostly white. Tony, you understand what this means without me having to spell it out, right? What do you mean? I've been working diligently. I haven't done anything that bad, right? Tony began making excuses, so selfish it was almost laughable. Eventually, he even tried to blame everything on his supposedly incompetent subordinates, leaving me utterly speechless. I understand your perspective, Tony, but you should go home now. Desperate to escape the painful stares of everyone around him, Tony bolted for the exit. But in his haste, he tripped over his own feet and crashed into a table full of food. With dishes overturned and food covering his head, Tony's clumsy fall brought a wave of laughter from the other attendees. Soon after, the branch manager from Tony's subsidiary rushed over to me, sweating profusely as he repeatedly apologized. As I glanced toward where I felt a gaze, I saw Tony staring at me with a face twisted in fear. Noticing Tony's panic, the branch manager, still lowering his head, shot a sideways glare of resentment at Tony. Tony, who had collapsed in fear, was so terrified that he lost the strength in his legs. He mustered his last bit of strength and managed to leave, crawling away. The next day, I showed up to work as usual, acting like nothing had happened. Good morning. The employees in the department, as always, returned my greeting without much enthusiasm. However, to Tony, who had learned my true identity the day before, was so startled that he knocked the papers off his desk onto the floor and collapsed on the spot. Gee, good more, Tony stammered, looking as if he had just seen a ghost. The employees, puzzled by Tony's odd behavior, glanced over at him with curiosity. Tony, are you okay? I'm good. Good. Tony's face was pale, drenched in sweat, and he was trembling uncontrollably. His voice shook, and he was in such a panic that he couldn't even form a coherent sentence. But none of the employees who had suffered under Tony's tyranny over the years offered him any comfort. Instead, soft chuckles could be heard from various corners of the office as they watched him cower in fear. Suddenly, I noticed an unfamiliar envelope among the papers that Tony had dropped on the floor. When I checked the contents, I found that it was a resignation letter. Tony, what's this? That? Oh. Hearing murmurs of "not again" from the surrounding employees, my suspicions turned into certainty. It was a resignation letter from one of the employees who recently left. I had heard rumors, but it turned out that Tony had been forcing employees who couldn't tolerate his abuse to resign, and processing them as voluntary resignations. He even had the resignation documents mailed to him so that he could submit them himself. In doing so, he changed the payment details so that the severance pay was transferred to his own account. Tony, this is a serious problem. You shouldn't expect to continue working here after this. Even as I expressed my exasperation, Tony felt at his knees begging for forgiveness. But there was no way he could be pardoned so easily. After reporting Tony's misconduct to the branch manager, including the issue of the resigned employees, the branch manager turned pale and began shaking as well. Although I felt sorry for the branch manager, I had no choice but to accept his demotion and pay cut for allowing Tony's tyranny to go unchecked. Less than a week later, Tony was officially dismissed for gross misconduct. Additionally, Tony was ordered to return the severance pay to the employees and compensate the company for the damages he caused. Tony's dismissal revealed one of the long-standing mysteries. According to interviews with the employees, Tony had been claiming to be a relative of my family simply because we shared the same last name, even before he became a department head. While it's true that having the same last name by coincidence didn't change anything, I was unaware that it had been exploited in this way until now. My father, busy with his duties as CEO, likely hadn't noticed either. I also blame myself for not being more visible. As childish as it may seem, it was apparently effective enough to help Tony land his position as a department head, at least partly due to the surname connection. With the compensation he owed, Tony lost not only his severance pay, but also all his savings. Having lost not just his position as a department head, but his job altogether, Tony's wife filed for divorce. The divorce was finalized, and now Tony supposedly lives a modest life on his own. Since then, I hadn't heard much about Tony, until one day I was surprised to come across his name in an unexpected place. I received a report about an incident of dining and dashing at a store in a rural area. The culprit tried to flee immediately, but tripped over his own feet as he started running and was arrested on the spot. That culprit turned out to be Tony. The unfortunate incident involving Tony quickly became the talk of the company. The name Tony Walker, once a former department head, took on a life of its own and eventually became the subject of jokes everywhere. A few months later, after I was officially appointed as the new CEO, the first thing I focused on was making the company more transparent to prevent anything like Tony's situation from happening again. Despite everything that happened, Tony became a sort of cautionary tale, and in that sense, he indirectly helped the company. After revising the training manuals based on the issues I uncovered while visiting the various stores operated by our group subsidiaries, the company's performance began to improve steadily. We decided to implement the new manual in the newly opened stores. The manual worked well, but the employees were overwhelmed by the unexpected rush of customers. Even though I joined in to help, it was so busy that I could hardly keep up. But surprisingly, despite the large number of customers waiting outside, not a single complaint was filed. Curious about how smoothly everything was running inside, I went to check the situation outside. There, I found a middle-aged security guard engaging with the waiting customers. This guard was keeping both children and adults entertained, making the long wait enjoyable for them. When I approached the guard to express my gratitude, I was shocked to realize that it was Tony, looking a bit worn, but unmistakably him. "Oh, hello, Magnus. It's busy today, isn't it? Don't worry about outside. I've got it covered." Thanks to Tony, the grand opening day went off without a hitch. I wanted to thank him after we finished cleaning up, but he had already left, and I couldn't find him anywhere. Throughout the entire grand opening campaign, Tony worked tirelessly as a security guard without taking a single day off. On the final day, when I finally managed to thank him, Tony, now a completely different person, talked with a humble attitude that I could hardly believe was the same man I once knew. "I'm truly sorry for the trouble I caused before. It may not make up for it, but I'm glad if I could help in some way." Tony had transformed so much that even I, who knew his past behavior, couldn't recognize him as the same person. Feeling genuinely happy, I couldn't help but smile in surprise. Would it be possible for us to assign you as the security guard for the next new store we open? Tony, looking embarrassed, smiled slightly and bowed deeply before leaving without saying a word. As I watched Tony's now confident figure walk away, an idea came to mind. I decided to incorporate Tony's hospitality, which I had witnessed firsthand, into the company's training manuals. I'm confident that Tony's efforts now, as a changed man, will bring smiles to many more customers in the future. How much longer will you keep us waiting? Voices of rage reverberated throughout the event space. The major problem with the company's presentation was that the guests didn't comprehend German or English. The seminar manager, the daughter of the firm president, stood pale and still in amazement. Well, well, well. I snatched up the microphone in the middle of the confusion, and the hall's atmosphere abruptly altered. You, who are you? When I looked out the window after waking up in the uncomfortable airline seat, I observed a crowded group of buildings below. Over time, the modest, flat-looking buildings grew into enormous skyscrapers. The Empire State Building loomed over Times Square, its neon lights flickering in the waning night sky. Eyeing the flower-shaped papercraft in my palm, instead of the dawn-stained landscape, I whispered, "I'm home." Taylor, Lucas, 28 years old. I was back in America. My parents lost their lives in an automobile accident, a huge traffic jam on the interstate, 15 years ago. A tanker ahead was struck by my dad's automobile after it was rear-ended. The car's front end was so badly damaged that it was unrecognizable. The news that day focused significantly on the destruction, showing the driver and passenger seats entirely crushed. Both my mother, who was in the passenger seat, and my father, who was operating the vehicle, perished. However, I survived as a 13-year-old who was seated in the back seat at the time. We had been traveling to a big hospital in New York to see my younger sister Emily. Emily, who was 2 years my junior, was constantly in and out of the hospital due to a congenital heart issue. Emily's doctor had reported that day that she was improving and might be released for a short time the following week. Emily and I engaged in paper crafts as our parents spoke with the doctor. We laughed a lot on the way home as we discussed what kind of cake to acquire to commemorate her return and what meals we would prepare together. Then everything happened in a flash. In the blink of an eye, it was all over. Emily had crafted a morning glory flower that day, and I was holding it. My maternal grandma took in Emily and me because my dad's parents had already died. However, she already lived alone, and it was too much for her to handle alone while taking care of a sick child like Emily and a middle schooler like me. In addition, I had become reclusive following the stress of the event. I had vague recollections of the period. My mom's younger brother, Uncle Jack, was the one who contacted me at that time. I didn't know my uncle very well because he was constantly busy traveling the world for work. However, since I was a young child, my mother had always told me that he was her cherished younger brother and that she was proud of him. "Lucas, how about coming with me and seeing the world?" As I stood there in silence at my parents' grave, he said this with complete conviction. The sudden decision to take in a middle school student was a significant commitment for an uncle who had cherished the independence of being alone. I went around the world with him after that. We would occasionally spend a year in a country, and other times just a few months. Jack encouraged independence and seldom interfered, but he never let me worry about money. I was initially overcome by emotional shock and the abrupt shift in my surroundings. However, I gradually developed my ability to interact with the outside world. Emily, meantime, continued her pattern of hospitalizations and discharges while staying with our grandma in the United States. Her brother likewise abruptly moved for overseas after she lost both of her parents so abruptly. An 11-year-old girl must have had an incredible sense of loss. Whenever I returned to the US, usually once a year, Emily would cling to me with a radiant smile. Even as she grew older, she still acted like the same 11-year-old girl, holding back sobs with a flushed face whenever I had to leave. I would wipe away Emily's falling tears, promising her each time, "I'll definitely come back for you once I'm able to work." In return, Emily would hand me a flower-shaped paper craft she had made. She would call it a good luck charm, as if entrusting her hopes and wishes to that piece of paper. Work in America and live with Emily, that was my dream and my purpose. To support Emily's medical needs, I needed a stable income and a solid living environment. Following Jack's advice, I graduated from a university in Switzerland in 4 years. I found a job with an American company. Now I can finally live with Emily. When I called to share the good news, Emily's voice sounded happier than I had ever heard. But right after that, the global pandemic struck, making it nearly impossible to leave Switzerland. Days passed in the frustrating limbo of helplessness, waiting for the crisis to end. And then, the worst happened. Emily has. My grandmother's frail voice on the phone sounded distant. Emily, who had fought so hard despite being told she might not live past 20, had reached the end of her fight. I couldn't even attend her funeral, and was unable to say goodbye to the only family I had left. I canceled my planned job with the American company and ended up working in Switzerland. Unable to return to the US, even after travel restrictions were lifted, I still couldn't accept the world without Emily. This year, I was assigned to transfer to the US branch and return to America for the first time in 7 years. Welcome home, Lucas. After handling the paperwork for my new apartment, I headed to my grandmother's house in the evening. She looked smaller than I remembered from our last meeting. "You're staying for dinner, right? Oh, but first, you should say hi to everyone." My grandmother, who was always eager to care for me when we met after so long, suddenly glanced toward the back room. There was a memorial space in that room, adorned with photos of my parents, and a smiling young girl. I felt the world sway for a moment. Who is in that photo? The pounding in my ears grew louder. Was that the sound of my own heartbeat? Unable to bear the growing tightness in my chest, I mumbled an excuse about an urgent matter and rushed out of my grandmother's house. I wandered the streets to calm my racing heart. Night had already fallen. New York was as lively as ever, crowded with people to the point where I wondered how anyone could live in such a bustling place. Among this sea of people, I felt like Emily could be somewhere out there. That thought gave me a strange sense of comfort. The humid June air brought back memories of New York. Seasoned holding a strong canned cocktail I bought at a liquor shop, I aimlessly wandered the streets. Only in New York could I get away with something like this. As my heartbeat settled, I exhaled and stopped walking. Before I knew it, I had wandered into a back alley near the entertainment district, the so-called nightlife scene. That's when I heard a woman's voice cry out, "Let me go." I turned toward the sound and saw a man grabbing a woman's arm while smirking. The woman raised her voice, trying to free herself, but the people around her only glanced over and quickly looked away, making no attempt to help. This wasn't exactly the safest area, so maybe scenes like this were all too common. While I debated whether to intervene or look the other way, the man passed by me, dragging the woman toward the deeper part of the alley. I decided to stay out of it. But then I caught a familiar scent as they passed. I knew that smell. Emily. Before I realized it, I was sprinting into the alley. The man looked shocked when I appeared out of nowhere, and his face turned pale when I suddenly grabbed him by the collar. I must have looked terrifying, shouting at him like a madman, my eyes undoubtedly wild with rage. The man panicked and ran off, leaving the woman behind. I turned to her and hugged her tightly. "I'm sorry I'm so late." A mix of alcohol and the sterile scent of hospitals clung to her. It's really Emily. She's alive. Overwhelmed with joy and on the verge of tears, I hugged Emily even tighter. But suddenly, the woman's body tensed, and she began to struggle against my embrace. Let go of me. The moment my grip loosened, pain exploded across my cheek. Let go, you creep. As I registered the slap that landed without mercy, I was startled by the unfamiliar voice. Who was this? The woman standing before me was a stranger. She did seem to be around Emily's age, but the woman glaring at me with eyes full of confusion, anger, and fear looked nothing like the Emily I knew. I'm sorry. I thought you were my sister. That's right. Emily couldn't be here. I knew that. I really did. Your sister. What's wrong with you? Are you crazy? The woman's face twisted in disgust as she turned and ran off. Her lingering scent was still that familiar smell. The humid air wouldn't let it leave my nose. What the hell is wrong with me? Maybe the strong alcohol dulled my senses and made me lose it. I stood frozen in that spot, unable to move for a long time. The following Monday was my first day working at the U.S. branch. My job was to promote our medical products at events and seminars. I was scheduled to be stationed there for 1 to 2 years to help expand our market share in the U.S. and beyond. Lucas, you'll be assisting with the next scheduled seminar and event. This is Mary Sutherland, the event manager. After being introduced by my supervisor, Mary and I exchanged greetings, and then froze as we looked at each other. Once my supervisor finished explaining everything and left, an awkward tension filled the air between us. Well, I really am sorry for the other day. Even though it was a case of mistaken identity, I put you through a terrifying experience. I was the first to break the silence. Standing before me was Mary, the woman I had mistaken for Emily and hugged that night. I never expected that the guy from the other night would turn out to be from our company, let alone someone transferred from the headquarters. Should I call the police? I'm really sorry. I know this sounds like a lame excuse, but I had just arrived in the U.S. that day, was jet-lagged, and had been drinking. I wasn't thinking straight. Hearing my own words made me realize just how pathetic they sounded. Mary let out a small sigh. Please, you can raise your head now. It's true that you reeked of alcohol that night. Being drunk doesn't excuse your actions, but regardless of your intentions, you did save me in a dangerous situation, so I won't speak about this incident. You're supposed to be a highly skilled specialist sent from the main office. As long as you deliver results at work, I don't care about your personal character. However, don't approach me unnecessarily. While making it clear she didn't trust me, she never brought up the incident again after that. With her sharp, confident gaze, flawless makeup, and long, slightly wavy hair, she was the epitome of a capable professional. The more I looked at her, the less she resembled Emily. After that disastrous first encounter, I never noticed the same unique scent of alcohol around her again. A few days later, I learned from my colleagues that Mary was the branch manager's daughter. This company wasn't the kind of place where executives could simply hire their relatives. She went through the same hiring process as other employees and even faced her father during the final interview. It's well known in the company that the branch manager had no idea his own daughter was applying until the day of the interview, and was genuinely shocked when she walked in. Mary was exceptional at her job and had already led several major projects at just 26 years old. I felt both admiration and a pang of sadness, knowing that a woman Emily's age had accomplished so much, something my sister never got the chance to do. I found myself searching for connections between my sister and her, even though they were nothing alike. But I forced those thoughts out of my mind and threw myself into my work. By the time 2 months had passed at the branch, Mary's guarded attitude toward me seemed to have softened somewhat. Today, we had a meeting with representatives from the company we were co-hosting the seminar with next month. It was my first time attending, so I'd be meeting their representatives for the first time. Before the meeting, I asked Mary about the representative from the other company. She replied, "I don't think we'll get any valuable input from them, so we'll handle the discussion ourselves and wrap it up quickly. A response that could easily be taken as condescending. I was surprised by her blunt comment. In the 2 months I'd known her, Mary had never struck me as someone who looked down on others. Feeling puzzled, I entered the meeting room, and when the representative from the other company called out to me, I immediately understood. It all made sense. "Lucas? Are you Lucas Taylor?" That was his first response to my greeting. Having worked in Switzerland, where business etiquette was more casual, I'd initially struggled with formal English in professional settings, and I still wasn't fully used to it. But even I felt like frowning at the way this man leaned in close and shouted his greeting. "Have we met before?" Forcing a smile to keep from frowning, I asked politely. He looked at me as if I'd said something ridiculous. "It's me, Brian Jones. We were in middle school together. You remember, right? We were in the same class in 7th grade until you moved out. I even hung out with you back then." As he grinned and introduced himself, I dredged up vague memories until I finally recalled him. "Oh right, Brian. Long time no see. I never expected to run into you in a professional setting. I had been in an accident before summer break in 7th grade and left the country with my uncle that winter. To be honest, I barely remembered anything from middle school. My time at that school was too short for me to make any real friends. When I returned to school after the accident, most of the students treated me like I was fragile, while others saw me as a source of gossip and pestered me with questions about the accident. Brian had been one of those kids. You stopped coming to school, and then you left without saying goodbye. We thought you might have, done something drastic because of losing your parents." His grin made it clear that he had never been genuinely worried. It had always been a joke to him. "Still, I can't believe you're with that company now. Are you a temp or something? Are you a high school graduate?" Brian's smirk widened as he said something so absurd I was momentarily speechless. "Don't worry. I'll guide you during this event so you don't mess things up. You better not drag Mary down. Mary, you can count on me." He suddenly turned his attention to Mary and started boasting with an air of exaggerated confidence. Such a blatant attempt to show off, and it was completely unprofessional. Just as I was about to speak up to steer the conversation back on track, Mary interrupted. "Excuse me, but our company only hires college graduates. And yes, that includes Lucas. He's an employee from the Swiss headquarters. Technically, I'm the one who should be learning from him. I'm sure you can learn quite a bit from Lucas during this event, Brian. Also, while our company hires only college graduates, personally, I don't think academic background matters that much. After all, some people have impressive degrees but lack character." Mary spoke calmly, not even glancing at Brian. Before Brian, his face flushed red, could say anything, I urged everyone to move on due to time constraints. Only Mary responded with a, "Let's move on to the main topic," before smoothly transitioning to the work discussion. One of Brian's assistants looked awkward, while Brian himself remained silent, barely hiding his irritation. Once the meeting ended and we were alone, I turned to Mary. "Mary, thanks for stepping in earlier, but you really didn't have to. Won't that cause tension between the companies? I feel like it's my fault for being here." This event was officially a joint collaboration, but Mary was the one in charge. A conflict involving the person responsible would undoubtedly complicate things. "It's not your fault, Lucas, so don't worry about it. Brian has always acted that way, and I just reached my limit." She shrugged with a faint smile. Was I a bit childish? Seeing her playful side, I shrugged and chuckled. Saying that last line really packed a punch. I really hate people who label others, look down on them, and make snap judgments without knowing the full story. That straightforward opinion was so typical of Mary. But to be honest, when I was a kid, I used to do the same thing, jumping to conclusions about people. There were always people talking behind my back because of who my dad was, and that just made me more rebellious. But someone told me that wasn't right. She said to me, and to the kids who looked at me with prejudice, "It's a waste to judge someone based on just one side of who they are." "Sounds like an amazing person," she responded quietly. "Yes, she really was," I replied, her long lashes lowering with a hint of sadness. After that, the daily work and preparations for the event went smoothly. Brian never brought up the incident again. In fact, he didn't just stay silent, but he practically did nothing. He only completed tasks when explicitly instructed. As Mary had predicted, there was no valuable input from him. The day of the seminar event arrived. The main target audience was foreign healthcare workers hoping to work in the U.S. American healthcare facilities are highly regarded worldwide, attracting many international nurses. Applications came from people in various countries, particularly from Europe. An hour before the event start time, despite the preparation being scheduled to begin 2 hours prior, Brian was nowhere to be seen. Some of the necessary equipment and materials for this event were his responsibility to prepare. They were also in charge of providing the translation devices that contained audio recordings of the seminar content and materials customized by language for the attendees. This seminar was promoted as accessible even to those without knowledge of German. Since medical terminology is difficult, even for those fluent in German, the translation devices tailored to each participant's language were a key feature. Without them, complaints from the attendees were inevitable. I tried calling Brian multiple times, but he wasn't answering. His assistant had another event to handle today and couldn't make it, so Brian was supposed to come alone. Since the event was being held on a Sunday, the company office itself was closed, so calling the office line was useless. We were completely stuck. Time dwindled down to the last 30 minutes. The seats in the venue were gradually filling up with attendees. There were 50 attendees in total. Although it wasn't a large-scale event, the seminar played an important role in collecting data that would be useful for the development of future electronic medical records. To ensure future seminars, this event needed to be a success. The clock was ticking. Seeing Mary's growing anxiety, I told her to stall for time by briefly touching on the seminar content during her opening remarks, and then I stepped away. When I returned a few minutes later, complaints had already begun to erupt from the attendees. "Hey, how much longer? How long are you going to keep us waiting?" Despite her flustered state, Mary was holding her ground and delivering her speech in German. Impressive as always. "I'm very sorry. Please wait just a little longer." However, many attendees weren't German speakers. Seeing Mary struggling to respond to attendees who were pressing her in languages other than German, I stepped forward and began speaking. "My sincerest apologies for the delay. We'll be ready shortly. So in the meantime, I'll take any questions you have." I announced this in German and as many other languages as I could manage. As Mary stood speechless beside me, I continued switching between German and other languages to calm the attendees and buy us more time. Once we stepped away from the front, Mary turned to me and said, "Lucas, that was amazing. How many languages do you speak?" she asked, her voice filled with excitement. "Well, after living in so many countries, including Spanish and German, maybe 6, but only at a conversational level, and it's nothing formal anyway." The real challenge starts now. Still no response from Brian. What should we do? Sure, I can handle basic conversations, but when it comes to medical content, we really need the translation devices that Brian was supposed to provide. Mary, visibly stressed, took out her phone. Something fell from her pocket. Mary, you dropped something." A paper craft. I picked up a flower-shaped paper craft. It was laminated, worn at the edges, and looked quite old. "Oh, I'm sorry. That's my good luck charm." I couldn't take my eyes off it, making Mary look at me curiously. "Well, right. Sorry. I'll be right back. I'm going to buy some paper craft supplies from the store next door." She dashed off toward the building adjacent to the venue. 10 minutes later, she returned, slightly out of breath, and began distributing 2 sheets of paper to each participant. "Lucas, could you translate what I'm about to say to the attendees?" She set up the camera to film her hands and displayed the footage on the monitor. "I'd like to introduce you to paper crafting, an activity that's also used in American pediatric wards and rehabilitation centers." With that statement, Mary kicked off an impromptu papercraft workshop. Often thought of as just a kid's activity, paper crafting is sometimes incorporated into medical and caregiving settings. The simple yet intricate use of both hands and brain stimulation, combined with customizable difficulty levels, makes it an effective rehabilitation exercise. As she explained this, the papercraft workshop surprisingly captivated the participants. As they followed along and began making their crafts, everyone seemed both focused and genuinely enjoying themselves. Midway through the workshop, Brian's assistant finally arrived with the translation devices, allowing the seminar to continue as planned. The seminar, which had been delayed by about 30 minutes, finally concluded. As I saw a female participant happily holding a misshapen paper flower on her way out, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. Once the room was empty, it fell silent. "What do you think you're doing?" Mary's clear, composed voice rang through the quiet venue, tinged with anger. The assistant and Brian had arrived during the papercraft workshop because I had called the assistant directly. Brian, who hadn't expected me to have his assistant's contact information, glared at Mary with a bitter expression. "Why did we go 30 minutes over the rental time? This is a shared seminar event. You can't just run over like that." "Well, since you're the main coordinator, I guess your side will cover the cost, right?" The content was well received, wasn't it? "Do you have any complaints about that, Brian?" "What the hell are you saying?" Even Brian's assistant looked bewildered by his nonsensical remarks. "Do you even realize the chaos you caused? Or did you show up late on purpose to sabotage things? Do you have any pride in your work at all?" Mary's rising anger was palpable. "I was late. Who says I was? Stop accusing me. Hey, I was here the whole time, right?" He placed a hand on the assistant's shoulder, blatantly intimidating him. The assistant looked too scared to contradict him. I felt a wave of disgust at Brian's reckless actions and childish attempts to bully others. "Can you still say that after seeing the company car footage?" Mary's tone, once fiery, turned cold and sharp. "Huh." Brian looked confused, so I added more context. "The company car you used today belongs to our company. All our cars are equipped with dash cams. Brian had been using one of our company cars for transporting equipment. At that, Brian's face turned pale. The dash cam's GPS, timestamped route, in-car footage, and audio would clearly reveal the truth, and his lies could be reported to the company without issue. "This will be reported to your company, and I'll also report the repeated, unnecessary personal messages you've sent me as harassment. Don't contact me ever again." Mary's expression was as cold as ice, her anger replaced by a chilling finality. Brian's face went ghostly white, and there was no way we'd ever work with him again. Cheers. Cheers. Despite the ups and downs, the seminar event gave us a solid sense of accomplishment, so Mary and I went out for drinks to celebrate. Thinking about it, this was the first time we'd gone out for drinks together. Even though it was September, the humidity lingered, and the night air felt uncomfortably warm. The ice-cold beer was refreshing, cutting through the muggy atmosphere. "Brian was messaging you personally. Why didn't you report it to the company earlier?" "I wanted to wait until the seminar event was over. I was trying to handle it peacefully. But after today, I completely lost my patience. I'm going to make sure he can never work with us again." She spoke casually, nibbling on a pickle as though used to dealing with unwanted advances. At a glance, she's a radiant and beautiful woman. It's no surprise that plenty of men try to approach her. Nothing happened this time, but you should be careful. If something like that happens again, report it to the executives sooner. It's too late once something happens. Lucas, are you secretly a worrywart? You're like a dad, or maybe an older brother, considering your age. Mary burst out laughing at my advice, making me feel a bit embarrassed, like I had overreacted. I had a younger sister. Maybe that's why I tend to worry when it comes to women around her age. A younger sister. Oh yeah, you mentioned that when we first met, right? Was that true? Hearing the word sister seemed to jog her memory of our first encounter, and she asked for the truth, now, of all times. I let out a sigh and slumped my shoulders. I probably came across as suspicious, and I really did something terrible that day. But yes, it's true. I had a younger sister who was 2 years younger than me. She would have been the same age as you. You had a sister. What happened to her? She passed away. At my words, Mary whispered, "I'm so sorry," as if apologizing for something she couldn't quite name. More importantly, that spontaneous papercraft workshop you came up with today, it was brilliant. It was such a creative idea, Aid, and I think it could be a great addition to future international seminar events. If we got help from physical therapists or specialists, we could make it even more impactful. Don't you think? I changed the subject, trying to shift the mood. Saying out loud that Emily was gone had left me feeling shaken. I came up with it on the spot after seeing that papercraft charm. It really felt like it helped me out, you know. She pulled the charm from her pocket and gazed at it with a wistful smile. I think I told you before about someone who once told me it's a waste to judge someone based on just one side of who they are. The person who made this charm for me was the one who said that. Mary told me that she had suffered from a serious illness and had spent a lot of time in the hospital as a child. After numerous surgeries and a long stay, she was now able to live a relatively normal life with regular checkups. During her time in the hospital, she became friends with the girl who had given her the papercraft charm. While Mary eventually recovered, the girl's condition was something that no medicine could fully cure. Even after Mary was discharged and started attending middle school, she continued visiting the hospital to see her friend. She had lost her parents in an accident and lived separately from her brother. She always seemed a little lonely, but whenever I visited, she'd brighten up and talk to me excitedly. She was so kind and got along with everyone in the hospital. They told her it might be difficult for her to live past 20, but she fought hard and reached 20. She was so close to finally living with her brother, who was overseas, but then. Mary's voice trembled and her eyes glistened faintly with tears. It was my Emily. At the sound of her name, my eyes widened in shock. Emily? She was my one and only sister. No way. You're Emily's brother. We both fell into stunned silence. Could this really be happening? Was it even possible that Mary was Emily's friend? The coincidence seemed unreal. I had no idea you were her brother. I said such horrible things when we first met, and I never even thanked you properly for saving me that night. Thank you. She lowered her head suddenly, and I panicked, telling her to lift her head. I remembered how Emily, who couldn't go out freely due to her long hospital stays, was really good at making paper crafts. Mary, by any chance, did you visit the hospital that day? Oh yes. I had a routine checkup, so I went to the hospital and was on my way home. The distinctive scent of alcohol I noticed when we first met. It wasn't just my imagination after all. I can't remember Emily's voice anymore. Without looking at a photo, I felt like I might forget Emily's face, but that scene stayed vividly in my mind. It became the memory that anchored me. As I lowered my head and murmured, "I see," Mary gently spoke to me. Emily always said she was so proud of you, Lucas. She said you'd come back from overseas every year, bringing her souvenirs and stories from your travels. She'd get so excited and determined to recover enough for temporary discharge whenever you were coming back. I wasn't the kind of brother she could be proud of. After we lost our parents, I barely spent any time with her. Her words made me painfully aware of how powerless I had been as her brother. That's not true. Emily said Lucas was amazing. No matter how you see yourself, in her eyes, you were the coolest, most beloved brother. Honestly, she talked about you so much that I started wondering just how awesome her brother really was. Surprised by her rapid words, I looked at her face. Our eyes met, and she was smiling with a tearful expression and softly murmured, "Yeah, it's true. Just like Emily said, Lucas, you really are a wonderful person." I wondered what kind of expression I had at that moment. Unlike her tearful eyes, mine felt completely dry. The following week, everything returned to normal at work. With the seminar event wrapped up, my paired assignments with Mary had come to an end, and we no longer crossed paths at work. One Friday night, I received a message from Mary, even though we hadn't really spoken much all week. "Would you like to visit Emily's grave with me this weekend?" I had been thinking about it all week. I hadn't been able to properly say goodbye to Emily. Maybe it was time to find closure. I accepted her invitation and left home Saturday morning. It was about an hour-and-a-half train ride from the city, somewhere not quite urban, but not too rural either. It had been a long time since I'd returned to my hometown. Emily now rested in the same place as my parents. The cemetery was about a 30-minute taxi ride from the station, a vast, well-maintained green space. Every time I returned to the U.S., I made sure to visit my parents' grave, but this was the first time in 7 years. I couldn't help but feel like an ungrateful son. We arrived at the gravesite. For some reason, I couldn't take a single step forward. Emily is here. Just the thought of it made my vision blur. Then I felt a soft hand on my back, gently soothing me. It was Mary, who had come with me. Despite barely having spoken during the trip, I was grateful for the silence between us. Taking a deep breath, I finally stepped up to the grave. I placed the flowers I'd brought, lit the candle, and pressed my hands together in prayer. Dad and Mom, I'm home. I greeted my parents, but I couldn't bring myself to speak to Emily, the gravestone now bearing more than just my parents' names. The reality that Emily was truly here hit me hard. "Lucas, I received this as a keepsake from your grandmother, but I think you should have it." Mary handed me an old smartphone. It was an outdated model that Emily had used for years. It was still charged and could be powered on. Inside were photos that Emily had taken. There were photos of her with Mary, smiling happily alongside her friends, her age friends I'd never seen before, and the sight made me smile. It hit me then. I had never taken a photo with Emily. I'd always avoided the camera, saying I didn't like photos. I regretted it now. In the folder titled Big Brother, there were childhood photos of Emily and me, likely taken from our family albums, and scenic pictures I had taken abroad and sent to her. Well, I wasn't sure if I should show you, but check the drafts folder. When I opened the email inbox as she suggested, there was indeed a single unsent message in the drafts folder. I opened the folder and read through it for a while, but I was left speechless. Big Brother, I was so happy when you told me over the phone that you were coming back to the U.S. and that we could live together. I said I was excited, but the truth is, we can't live together after all. Because you'd push yourself too hard for me, wouldn't you? Lucas, I probably don't have much time left. I don't want to see you sad because of me. I want you to live your own life freely. It might sound a bit dramatic, but this is my wish. If I'm allowed one last selfish request, please cry a lot when I'm gone. Cry, and don't forget me. But after you've cried, live happily and laugh again. Live your life. I love you, my big brother. I scrolled down and saw one more line of text. Lucas, I miss you. Tears streamed down my face as I read the message. The message had been written just a week before Emily passed away. What was Emily feeling as she typed it? What was going through her mind? What expression did she wear? How many times had she rewritten it? Was she crying? Smiling? In pain? Scared? Sniff. A strangled sob escaped my lips. A grown man kneeling at a grave, crying his heart out. It must have looked ridiculous, but I didn't care about that. Emily was gone. For the first time, I fully accepted that reality. Mary knelt beside me, not caring that the ground stained her clothes, and gently wrapped her arms around my shoulder as I sobbed. You finally cried. Holding back tears when you want to cry. It's so painful, isn't it? Mary's soft voice and the steady beat of her heart reached my ears. Yeah, you're alive. That sound reminded me of life itself. And gradually, my tears began to subside. Emily used to say, if Lucas and Mary got married, we could stay together as a family forever. It was like a little kid's fairy tale. But sometimes, I feel like Emily brought us together. After you've cried and cried, once you've cried it all out, why don't you try living and laughing with me? In response to her gentle, whispered words, I softly placed my hand over hers on my shoulder. Emily, I'm home. A gentle breeze swept over us, brushing against our heads as if in a tender embrace. The sadness of losing someone never truly goes away. But when you face that sadness head-on, you can find something precious in its place.